things that are out there, things that are stalking, things that are continuously trying to get a hold of us out there in the world. What are they? What have they done to us? And what can we do to protect ourselves from these dark entities? What can we do to protect ourselves from what are known as psychic vampires, people out there who quite literally are living off of negativity, and bringing that into your life as a point of consternation on purpose. So welcome to the show. How are you doing today, June?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic. I would like to apologize to our stream guests out there. We had a little bit of an audio hiccup, but we are out there. We're live. We're going. So, yeah, June, welcome to the show. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
Well, it's so great to have you here. I know, like we were saying before the show, you were recently on an episode of Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis. All kinds of fantastic stuff. So let's start getting into how you came into the world of mediumship, how you came into this trade and came about this gift. Is this a gift that everybody has? And what it is that brought you to this world.
Well, I was born this way, and my grandmother raised me for the first 5 years, and all the women in our family have gifts, different varying degrees and different gifts. And when I was little, I used to sit and talk to the animals. My grandmother encouraged that. And as I got older, I could see demons. When I was about 4.5, 5 years old, how I saw the demons changed. And Michael the Archangel, he's always been with me and since I was a little kid. And I was seeing something different. And my grandmother's like, what's going on? What are you afraid of? And, I'm like, doesn't look right. I'm like 4.5, 5. I'm like, bad things. And Michael said, don't worry about it. He says, you're seeing demons as we see them now. You're seeing them in their true form. You're seeing them through angelic eyes. When you're like 4.5, 5 years old, you're like, oh, okay. Michael's like, I want you to watch them. I want you to see what they do. I want you to learn how they work. So I would watch them whenever I would encounter them. And they didn't seem interested in me only because Michael said, I'm going to cloak you from them. They won't be able to bother you. They won't be able to quote unquote see you. So I grew up that way. I always had the ability to talk to those on the other side, that's dead. People like that. I've always been able to see the future. And for me, I thought that was normal. I thought everybody could do that. I didn't realize that was something not everyone could do. But when you're a kid, you just expect people to be that way. And then you find out that they're not so much that way, and children can be cruel. So you learn to keep to yourself.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I've got a 4-year-old right now, and I was definitely one of those kids that, and still am one of those people that I can count my capital F friends on like one hand.
Yeah. Exactly.
Those are the people that, like, when I am in dire need, they're the ones I go to. I got tons of friends, people that I call up, go out, have dinner with, hang out with. Let's go out, have a drink, talk topics, whatever. But when it comes to my support network in life, there's really only about 5 people there.
And that's the same with me. Yeah.
And now, and to see that in my son, where he talks about all the kids in his class and stuff like that, but to this day, one of his best friends is somebody that he spent pre-K with, like a year, like Mother's Day out, like a year or so ago. Like still
Yeah.
carries a picture of her around and talks about her every
Uh-huh.
day. You know, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm gonna go to Marlowe's house tomorrow. You know, we're gonna do this. And it's interesting to see, like you're saying, how those things go so far back
Yeah.
and are
Yeah.
so ingrained in us as people. You know, and you can really see when somebody's young, what their propensity for stuff like that is. Are they going to be an outgoing person?
Yeah. I've always been an introvert. When I was in high school, we had a relatively big high school, and I was voted the quietest and shyest in the entire school. So that tells you I didn't say much.
the the
Not
one
anymore,
the
but
one
back
who's
then.
like the half face in the school picture because you're like trying to get out of it, you know.
Yeah. Yep, that was
Yeah,
me.
yeah. And now, was it something that you didn't necessarily feel the same as the other kids because of that, or was it something that the other kids just couldn't relate because of that?
Most people couldn't relate to it. They think you're weird or something like that. I learned young not to talk about it
Mm,
because people either thought you were crazy or strange,
sure.
and that was fine because you know I've spent more time talking to dead people than I did talking to the living. It wasn't a problem for me. I had a lot of friends that were dead.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what I was going to ask, especially as a young child and the many people that I've interviewed who are mediums, who are trans mediums, communicate with the other side, quote, see dead people, as the phrase goes from the movie.
Yeah.
That when it did start for them when they were young, it was not a situation of them being afraid of these entities.
Yeah. I was
Because
never afraid of demons.
yeah. And how was it? I mean, of course you had the gentleman who was helping you distinguish between the two at a young age.
Yeah,
And
Michael the Archangel. He
yeah.
was always there, always. If I had any questions, he always responded, always answered them.
And
So it wasn't a big deal.
well, and with that guardianship, was that because, of course, like you said, Michael gave you the charge to go forth to learn, to basically see how they worked in the world
Mm.
around you.
Yeah, he wanted me to observe, and he said it would come in handy later in life. And of course, I didn't know what he meant, so it didn't matter at that time. But I spent my teenage years observing and things like that. I left for the military when I signed up for the military when I was 17 and left when I was 18.
Mm.
And I pretty much kept to myself because, it's frowned upon. So you just kind of keep to yourself. I remember my first real encounter with a demon where it was one-on-one was we had a young man, he was a chaplain's assistant, and somebody had put some angel dust in his soda. He was at a party,
Oh my.
and they couldn't find him for 3 days. And they finally, I was medical, working in the ER at that time, and they said, we're going to go into his room to see if he's there. I think they were afraid he was dead. So they opened up his room, and he's sitting there curled up in a ball on the floor. And here's this demon over in the corner waiting for him to die. And I'm thinking to myself, not on my watch or not. So we got him out of there and got into the ER. I went to get the supplies to start an IV, and the demon was leaning over him, trying to pull out his life force. And of course, that pissed me off. And I'm like, I look at it and I said, he is ours, not yours. And whatever it was that he saw in my face, demon was like out of there. At the time, I didn't realize. I thought it was just like, oh, well, he's freaked out or something. But it wasn't until I died in a motorcycle accident that I that I learned what was inside me. So I just, it was like, I'm dead. I'm going into the light, and I get to the other side. My grandparents are waiting for me, and Michael's there, and he's like, you need to understand who and what you are. And I'm like, I'm me. I'm just me. He's like, no, you're not. And he touched my forehead, and he's like, I relived all of these past lives and back to the core soul. He says, this is who you truly are. He says, you are Ariel, the archangel. That you were sent back to relive human lives until you learn to have compassion for mankind. He said, and he said, look at yourself. And I could see myself as a reflection in the clouds that were surrounding us. And I was like 7 foot tall. I had wings, and I had like dark brown reddish hair, and I had blue-green eyes. And he says, you are Ariel, the archangel. He says, your job, you must go back and start doing demon removals. And I'm like, okay. So long story short, I went back. I had no clue who Ariel was. I mean, all you can find online is she's one of the 5 that guard the throne of God, and her name means Lion of God. But it's because they really don't know much about her, and she's so much more. That was back in 1980, 87.
And how old were you when that occurrence happened to you?
I was 28.
Wow. And of course, not your first graze with the paranormal, not your first, as you said, visitation conversation with Michael the Archangel, but definitely the first time that you recognized what was in front of you for what it was.
Yeah, all these years I knew that I could do these things, and I knew I could see demons in their true form. And, it was then that I understood why. That's why I can understand demonic language. That's why I can understand angelic language. The demons, they speak in Aramaic, and my brain is kind of hardwired to interpret it. So I know exactly what they're saying. It's never nice, of course, but, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, they tend to not be happy guys, these demons.
No, especially,
Now,
especially somebody's going to kill them. So, what do you know?
I can definitely relate to what you were saying as far as, and even being older and being in the military and keeping sightings like this, things like this to yourself, not even letting chaplains know, that kind of stuff. Because even my 1 year in the seminary, I thought that maybe I would meet a lot more people that had some sort of profound religious experience where they had felt the presence of something that moved them into this.
Right.
I was very surprised to find out not the case.
No.
Most people do not have that beautiful beatific moment attached to their aha moment in life.
Exactly.
That's a pretty rare and distinct thing.
It is.
How has that presence of Michael the Archangel changed your awareness in the world around you? Because, of course, like he said, he wanted you to, even from a young age, observe and see these things for what they were. But it took you a long time to be able to just open eye see what was going on.
Yeah, look through. That's the thing, and Michael did what he called merge, where people think that, okay, that Ariel is a separate entity, and in one way she is, but my body was created as a vessel for her soul to enter the physical world and do her job. And so I can hear what she hears. I can see through her eyes, and because they don't see like humans do, they see pure energy. It's, I can look as a human and see this, but when I look through her eyes, I see the energy everywhere. It's quite different. And when I do a removal, then when Ariel comes forward, there are physical manifestations. People say they see, wings coming out of my shoulders, my eyes turn white, my voice changes, my face changes. And, people, I always used to wonder, why are people looking at me weird? And then finally somebody said, you do know that when she comes forward, this is what we see. I'm like,
Wow. Wow.
don't you? They're like, don't you see that? I'm like, A, I'm a little busy doing a removal. B, I don't have a mirror. And C, I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
getting the job done.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, how long between your moment there as an army nurse with your moment of epiphany that, wow, that is what is directly in front of me, and the scales were, so to speak, removed, where now you could just immediately distinguish these things.
Yeah.
How long has it been since you began this path of spiritual healer, demon seer?
1987.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Been a
And
while.
what is that journey? What has that journey been like for your family, June? Because that's a big pivot in life to
Yeah.
take. I mean, even now, you're still actively a nurse. You're still actively out in the medical profession, things like that.
Yeah. It's kind of different. I
'Cause-
I always knew I would never have a child until I was
mm,
30. And my son was born when I was 30. And my husband, when I was pregnant with our son, I said, listen, I waited till I was about 9 months along. And I told him, I said, listen, I said, this is what I can do. This is who I am. And I said, and what's inside of me will probably be able to do most of the same thing. And
yeah.
he's like, he's so left brained. It's like, oh, okay, whatever, like that. It's only when he started seeing things, and then he's like, oh, okay, so this stuff does exist. I'm like, yeah, it does.
Now, let me ask you this, just out of curiosity, June, because of course, as the turn of phrase goes, wherever God is strong, the devil is strong as well.
Hmm.
Do you think that it might be the situation that just being around you, your husband had more of a propensity of a chance to see a shadow person, a negative entity? Are all shadow people negative entities? There's a question.
Yeah, all shadow people are negative. They're minions of the demons. I don't classify them as a full demon because they're not. They're
Mm,
more like a minion. You have, the old demons, which are the wisest and ones that have a brain. And then there are the lesser demons who are more like hormonal teenagers running rampant.
mm,
And then you have the creepy crawly dudes and the shadow people and the harpies and the incubus and succubus, all different kinds of ones. And for me, it's I see them all the time. Most of the time, unless they're causing a problem, I don't bother with them. It's when they start causing a problem that, I'm going to have to deal with them. And in the war between heaven and hell, Michael disarmed Lucifer and Ariel disarmed his son. And so they fear her and they respect her as they do Michael.
Well, and I was going to say, especially since this is, by all accounts, biblical, anecdotal, spiritual, this has been an ongoing battle for millennia.
Oh, yeah.
This
Yeah. Spiritual warfare
and
is going.
I guess the one question that I would have at that point is, these minion, these other things, because of course some of them are fallen angels, the demons, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But how is it that we expose ourselves to them, and how is it that they can manipulate us? Because we just had Gene Krause, a listener, ask the question, if we could ask you if you have noticed an increase in demonic activity and shadow people activity since things like CERN have fired up, and things like that. Are there more, I guess, so-called portals, that kind of thing?
I think that since I remember back in 2017, and because I can hear God like I'm talking to you, it's like he's like, I wanted to let you know that things are going to start ramping up. There's going to be more paranormal activity. There's going to be more violence. There's going to be more mental illness. He says, I wanted you to know that because there's things that are coming. And I'm like, okay. And right after that, they had the school shooting in Connecticut, and it's been ramping up for quite some time. The big thing is, stop and think about it. How many people, since these paranormal shows come out, there are dozens of these things. Everybody's got to have a paranormal investigative team. Everybody's got to do EVPs. Every time you do an EVP, every time you do an investigation, every time you use scrying, anytime you do tarots, anytime you do anything like that, it opens a portal to the other side. And 99.9% of the time, they do not close the portal.
Yeah, because you kind of got to be aware that you're actively opening a portal to begin with. You know,
and they're clueless.
The old people knew this. I remember my grandfather all the time. Shut my door. You let me AC out. No different. No different.
You're right. Exactly.
And if you look, all the old cultures, whenever you talk about things like incubus, succubus, soul-sucking energies, even the common cold, la gripa, stuff like that, it was due to open windows.
Yeah.
And it was that invitation, just like in Lost Boys, where it's like, come on, just open the window. Just let me in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just let
open
me
window,
in.
Open door. Yeah.
And the analogy I make all the time is, of course, the movie The Exorcist, where Regan, the girl in the movie, was playing with the Ouija board, just a harmless game. To her, a harmless game, but to the spirit that was trying to find a place, it was Captain Howdy, and became her friend.
Yeah, it's like a light in the dark. You open a portal, you don't close it. Anything can come in there. It's like you leaving your back door open, or your front door open. Anything and everything can come through there. It's just a matter, demons are opportunists. Yeah. If it doesn't present itself, they create one. That's just the way they are. It's never ending. People just don't realize that every time you do things like that, it opens a darn door and shut the darn thing. Because, and I can't tell you how many times people have contacted me from paranormal groups saying, they got an attachment, they're provoking. I'm like,
I can't imagine
why the heck are you provoking? Come on. It's like I told Zach Baggins, I said, do not provoke. You will be sorry. I
have said for years, and I've done my fair share of paranormal work, going out on investigations with groups, things like that. Yep. But I have questioned for years, the use of digital EVP equipment. Because pretty sure the whole concept was that they could manipulate the electromagnetic field, not digital ones and zeros.
Right.
So there was that to begin with. But secondly, it's the questions. It's the
Exactly.
walking around and the questions. And if you look, there are very specific things in whenever you go back to old texts, the Old Testament, things like that, whenever you're talking about necromancy and speaking with the dead and things like that. That's
Right.
why they were very specific in their wording.
Oh yeah.
It didn't
They didn't
say
mince any words.
don't partake in seeing, don't partake in mediumship. Didn't say that. What it
Nope.
said was don't commune with the dead. Don't speak with them. Don't try
Right.
to summon them.
Right.
Like very very specific rules
Oh yeah, yeah.
of what
I can't
not
tell
to
you
do.
how many times I've been called in on a case and the idiots have summoned the demon. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Give me a break here. Because the thing is, when somebody connects with me, whether it's by phone, by email, send me a picture, I know exactly what happened. I know what the demon's name is, and I know what it's been doing to the individual. And I tell them, it's like, you summoned this thing, and now you want me to help you? I'm like, stop doing that garbage,
Yeah.
because I'm going to take it away. But if you do it again, I'm not going to take it away. You've had your warning.
Yeah, yeah, and granted, because we've had you for a little while, and like I told you before we started, I don't like to tax first time guests, but I have to. It would be remiss of me not to get into how do we spot these things, June? Because sure, there are big bad beasties out there, no doubt, man. And I'm not going to say that I'm like an every Sunday church going dude anymore. It's not my jam. I talk with my God every day. I am very close with my spiritual side. But despite the big beasties out there, I think the bigger threat that most people do not realize is exactly what they open the door to every day.
Yeah.
Friends, so-called friends, families. The second part of this conversation tonight, the psychic vampires that we allow in our life, that quite literally bring us down to a level and whittle us down to a level that make it easier for that other part of the dark side to take hold.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of people that are negative, that you can feel. Sometimes you can feel this, literally feel the negative energy coming off of them at you. And they try to bring you down, and then next thing you know, you're being negative, and they're utilizing that. It's like they're spreading the negativity, and life is negative enough without adding to it by having somebody like that around. Psychic vampires don't just do that. You can be around someone that's a psychic vampire that's, you feel like you've been drugged through a knothole backwards.
Yeah.
Because they just drain all the life force out of you. It kind of reminds me of a shadow person.
Well, and the example that I give people all the time, God bless their hearts, June, children.
Yeah.
I nothing against them. I got my kids sleeping on the other side of the wall. I taught religion and music to 4, 5, and 6-year-olds for years, but that's when I noticed it. I worked with teens and youth for a long time, but it wasn't until I worked with 4, 5, and 6-year-olds that it was like, the difference is they just don't know that they're doing it.
Right.
You wonder where the boundless energy of children comes from. They are literally sapping it from every single person in the room.
Yeah.
Go ask any teacher. Go ask any teacher. There's a reason why, you get quite a few teachers that enjoy a drink right after work. I'm here to tell you that's some bombing happy hours as teachers. But,
most people are totally unaware that they're doing it.
Yeah.
But then there are those that do it purposefully.
Yes. And let's get into that real quick. How do we learn to spot that? Because of course, I mean, I had to, because of my realm of addiction years ago, my want to help everybody and make people
Yeah. Yeah.
projects, and my disappointment when those projects didn't turn out right is what led me
Right.
into my world of addiction. I was fortunate enough to be able to spot that. So now
Yeah.
I'm the project, and if I have enough bandwidth, I'll help you out. But if
Right.
not, I'm the
Right.
project.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I quit letting those people feed off of me. And it took a long, hard look at myself and who I surrounded myself with to realize the ones that were inadvertently doing it. You know, they just hadn't
Yeah.
reached that point in life where they were just over the fact of drama mattered.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Very
know,
much so.
because there are a lot of people that like they don't know how to live their life without a reticent amount of drama. You know,
True. True.
without a tire going flat all the time, they don't
Yeah.
know how to drive a car.
Yeah, see, that's one of the biggest things is people like that. When you're around them,
Mm.
you notice that by the time you got through, by the time you leave and go home or whatever, it's you feel like you've been dug through a knothole backwards, and it's because they're pulling all that energy from you, and then if they're really negative, then I mean, that just comes at you, hits you like a ton of bricks. And
Yeah.
that's not what life is all about. I know that sometimes you meet people and they'll be like, you're thinking, oh, drama queen. Everything is about them.
Yeah.
Everything is like just bigger than life, and all the bad things, quote unquote, that happen to them. And it's
Yeah.
better just not to be around them. I mean, personally, I don't need drama in my life. I've reached that point in my old age of 63 that I don't need that.
Yeah.
Life is too short.
Yes.
It's just not good.
Yeah. And I mean, quite honestly, myself as an artist, as a musician, as a creator, those are typically the people that I spend my time with.
Yeah.
And I think it's because mainly most of the artists that I hang out with are true artists. Like, they don't care if people like their music or buy their music. They're making it regardless.
Right.
You
They're
know?
all about creating something,
Yeah.
getting it out of their head and into the world.
Well, and even if it's our old co-host from the Dudes and Beer show before we rebranded this, Stephen Bishop, he's out there like booking shows and putting shows together and making talent get together on stage and stuff like that. That in and of itself is a realm of creativity, and this concept
is.
of I want to manifest something bigger than.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's good energy. That's creative
is.
energy.
That's energy that helps the world,
Yeah.
and that's important.
Yeah. How can we? Because of course, much like when I was a kid, New Age was the buzzword. It was
Yeah, I
all
remember
about
that.
New Age philosophy, New Age thinking. I mean, granted, I'm a kid of the '80s. I was born in '75, so it was right after Age of Aquarius action, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
now the buzzword is mindfulness. Even at the corporate
Yeah.
events that I work, guaranteed every single event has one presentation about mindfulness. One.
Yeah.
One. How much is that a buzzword, and how much of that is concrete truth and reality? June.
It is a buzzword, but it is concrete. If you're mindful about your actions and what's around you, and things that are, let's like give you an example, you like seeing somebody that you've known for years, right? And they're normally a very mellow type of person, and then suddenly you notice that they're no longer mellow, that they're always negative, or they're being violent or mean. That should be a trigger to say there's something more going on with them, and maybe it's just they're having a bad day. But if this continues and goes on, then you have to stop and think about it and be aware, be mindful of how they're behaving, And is it just them? Is it something that's surrounding them?
Yeah.
How do you feel when you're with that person suddenly? Do you feel like somebody's watching you? Do you feel like there's another presence? You know, if you are mindful about it, you can tell, you can see that there's something negative attached. You don't have to be able to see the thing. You can sense it.
Yeah.
You know, you can just like feel it. The air feels heavy.
Yep.
It feels like you have this feeling of absolute dread in the pit of your stomach, you know?
Yeah. That's it. The example I used to give the junior high and high school kids I taught, I would tie a piece of kite string to their pinky and just tug it. Be like, feel for that right behind your belly button.
Right.
And when you feel that, it could be bad, it could be good, doesn't matter. Just be aware of that and what is around you.
Yeah, if you're hyper aware, if you don't just blow everything off. Too many people, I should say 90% of the people, they don't want to be aware. They don't want to know. They just are like a horse with blinders on.
Well, if you know, then you're responsible and accountable, right?
Yeah, well.
Or is it the case that you're responsible and accountable anyway, and you should really know?
You should, but there are so many people that are not aware of it. It's like negative entities. You know, most people think, oh, you know, it's nothing. They blow it off, and it has to get to the point where it's in your face before you realize, maybe there's something here. You know, maybe it's not just bad luck. Or feel like you're cursed. You know, the entities don't need a reason to attach themselves to you.
No.
What people fail to realize is you can have one stalking you for years, days, weeks, months, years, and not even know it, and then until it finally attaches itself.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're like, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, and when people ask, of course, the question that comes after that, June, is always, well, why? Why is that dark entity attacking you? And it's like, why does the bully go after that kid and not the one right next to him?
Exactly. What they do is they can look in your mind. What they do is they look for, is this person easily influenced? Does this person have weaknesses? Can I exploit those weaknesses? Who do they care about? What do they care about? Are they prone to, are they in a violent situation, an abusive situation? Did they grow up in an abusive situation? Are they like, you know, a kid that wants to belong to something, so they run with the group, they run with the gang, so that they can feel like they belong? You know, it's many different things. These demons just, like I said, they stalk you. So they watch you. They watch for your weaknesses, what you care about, what makes you strong, what makes you weak. And, you know, a lot of times, like I said, they can watch you for years and you never know it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they'll attach, or they'll say, forget it. I don't want anything to do with this one. Even if your faith is strong, you know, it doesn't make any difference. If that kind of acts like
go ask Job how that worked out.
Yeah, they kind of it kind of acts like, oh, you know, if I can turn this person from the light to the dark, that's a feather in my cap. I'm going to do it.
Yeah. In the seminary, we called those girls chalice chippers.
Yeah. Okay.
The girls that would specifically target seminarians.
Yeah.
To try and go out with them, or, you know, things like that. But there's, and once again, it's, you wonder, like, they're no different a spiritual, energetic being than us. The only difference is the origin and the depths of that spiritual being. And like you said, if there is something that they will manipulate, use against you,
Oh yeah.
anything like that, that is what will be exacerbated and
Yep.
exaggerated, not only in your mind, but in your life.
Yeah, because they look into your mind and they can say, like, I don't like spiders.
Mm,
I mean, I don't fear them. I just don't like them. But the demon will try to make you see them or perceive them as what your what you the image that you have in your brain of what a devil looks like, oh, it's
yeah.
got horns, it's got cloven foot, whatever. It will take that image, it'll amplify it 100 times
Yeah.
and show it to you. They can't do that with me because I see them in their true form. But that's what they do to people. The shadow people will try to suck the life force out of you. I went in on I was called in on from another group because this was a negative entity that was there.
Mm,
And I told the man, I said, you don't understand. I said, these things, this is an old demon. This thing was entombed in the ground. I said, when man started building houses here, it woke it up. I mean, the man moved into this house with his wife. A woman had never been sick a day in her life. And within 2 years, she was dead
wow.
from a form of cancer that's almost unheard of.
Wow.
Almost unheard of.
Well,
And she kept telling her husband, I'm hearing things, I'm seeing things, and he's like, oh, it's nothing.
and call them crazy, but indigenous cultures that go back hundreds, thousands of years,
Oh, yeah.
things like that, they will literally point to a patch of land to go, yeah, we go around that to get to the river.
Yeah, it's
Like,
cursed.
but
Don't go there.
isn't there a mountain in the way? Yep.
Yep,
And
don't
we
make
go
no
over that mountain. We don't even dig
It's-
through the mountain because we're afraid to mess with the thing next door.
Yeah, it's kind of like Alcatraz.
Yeah.
They call it, they call it Devil's Island, and for good reason. I've been there on an investigation, and there's a demon, old demon, that's entombed underneath it in the rock itself.
And that's just it. That it was called that by the indigenous people
Yeah,
before
they
we
knew
ever
better.
put a fort there.
Yeah, we're stupid enough. Yeah, leave it to the white man to be stupid enough
It's
to
a
do
little
that.
bit of hubris, isn't it? Just a little bit.
It is. It's like the one I was just talking about.
Yeah.
There were Native Americans that were there. They were trying to help the people, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
Towards when I removed the demon and closed the portal, they came out of the woods, and they wanted to thank me for helping.
Yeah.
And they said we weren't strong enough. And I said, no, it's fine. And then they just kind of faded into the woods again.
Now, before we let you go, two final questions here, June. Number one, what are the subtle signs? Not that I don't want people to go visit mysticconnections.org, book appointments with you, things like that. However, what are the signs that they can spot before they need to call you? Before they need to call someone like, Archbishop James Cloud for an exorcism on their property or a family member. A lot of times it's subtle. There'll be like a definite change in an individual from, something that's not something that's out of the ordinary, or they'll say, it feels like somebody's watching me. It feels like somebody's here. The air will feel heavy. You'll feel the sick feeling in the pit of your stomach. You feel internally cold. It could be 100 degrees outside, but in the core of your being, it will be cold. It's not like a ghost where the cold spots are external. This is internal, and there's an ominous feeling. If you get any of that, or you start being scratched, or you hear knocking or banging in the series of three, which is the mocking of the trilogy, you need to mocking of the Trinity. You need to start being more aware. Start really becoming hyper aware, and see what you can do. To get help.
One of the things I do not suggest is that you sage the house, because if you think, oh, well, it's just a ghost, I'm going to sage the house. Or if you think it's something negative, you sage the house. To do that is to piss them off. And
Yeah.
it amps up the
Yeah.
activity a
Well,
hundredfold.
well, I mean, it's kind of like going around with holy water. Cool, you better be ready for step 2.
Exactly.
Like
And see, people
that
don't
is
understand.
that's like taking your shirt off at the bar.
Yeah.
It's go time now. They understand that. Do you?
And you can't, why would you provoke
Yeah.
something that you can't touch, you can't feel, you can't see, and that can kick your butt?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just foolishness.
Yeah, and very, very sound advice, because a lot of people would, of course, advise the opposite, things like that. And that was which leads me to my second question, because, of course, you can talk about, let me make a circle of salt all day long and stand inside of it while I do it.
It's not going to do you any good.
Yeah. Once again, you could make a circle out of like straight up gold rope, like 24 karat gold rope. The problem is, do you know what to do inside the circle, man? Do you,
Yeah.
do you know the rest of it?
There
because
are very
if you
few
don't,
things.
once again, you're just exacerbating the situation. You're poking the bear.
There are very few things that will actually ward off or protect against negative entities. White salt does nothing.
What are some of the things that do help, June?
I years ago, when I first started removing demonics, God says, I'm going to give you a recipe for a special black salt. Well, I'd never even heard of black salt at that time. And he gave me the recipe, and he says, I'm going to bless it at each step of the making of it. So in the 40-some years I've been using the black salt, it's never failed to protect. That's one of the things. A crucifix with the image of Jesus on it. It cannot be an abstract image. It must be a human, like a portrait.
Yeah.
Okay, and holy water over the doors, over the windows. You can use that to seal the house. You can invoke in the name of Jesus Christ and God Almighty will help to ward it off. There's, like I said, you can lay down the black salt around your property to keep anything negative out, or you can have necklaces that are filled with black salt. You wear them. When you wear them, it heats up. And that's where you know when you're in the presence of a negative. It heats up when it's protecting.
Wow.
But crystals don't help you. None of that. These are the only things.
Yeah, crystals are for changing vibration.
Yeah,
that's a totally different thing. Salt is a mineral. That's something totally different. A lot of people don't understand that, June.
Yeah, if you're gonna keep out a ghost, just use white salt. That's fine.
Sure.
I mean, but anything else, no. Yeah, I mean, you can have anything that's blessed will help to ward it off. I wish I could tell you there's something that would absolutely 100% keep them away. The only thing that I know to protect is the black salt and the crucifix.
Yeah, because even baptism, confirmation, daily Eucharist won't keep it away. Sorry, that's just a flawed thinking.
People come up with all kinds of things. Oh my God, some of the things that I have. When I'm working with people, and they'll tell me that some of the things that people told them to do to ward them off, to get rid of them, I'm like, oh my God,
What's
really?
the worst thing you've ever heard, June?
Okay.
Worst piece of advice you ever heard?
Walk backwards in a circle 3 times, and that will get rid of them. Or the second one is, send them love and light. That will get rid of them.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh my
yeah. Send them some more energy.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter what energy. You realize that, right? They're still feeding off you. That's kind of their gig. If it's bad energy, cool, because that's like worth its weight. That's like 10 cups of Joe as compared to one.
That's like a shot instead of a beer.
Yeah, exactly. Now, One question I always have to ask is, are aliens considered demons? Would you put them in the same category? And the reason I ask is because my last big question for you is, how do we close the portals? There are so many things out there right now, like we were saying, so many paranormal shows that seem to encourage people to partake in this. And I will even say, like, I've got Stephen Greer's C5 app on my phone. I've used some of the meditation things, stuff like that, some of the brain tuning things. But, you know, I kind of hesitate with the full-on attempt at contact because, how do you, I mean, even some of my astral projection work that I used to do, things like that when I was younger,
you have to be careful.
15 years ago, I now go to sleep with intent, like to look for an answer.
But
I'm not trying to traverse the universe anymore because how do I know? How do I know?
Exactly. Because anytime you do anything like that, it opens a door, it opens the portal. I think the best piece of advice I can give you is, or anyone is, if you see something negative, do not acknowledge it. To acknowledge it is to make it see you. You don't want it to see you.
Interesting.
Because if they see you, it's like 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You're in New York. You're walking down the sidewalk, and you got this idiot that's walking the opposite direction that everybody else is going.
Yeah.
And everybody's looking at him like, idiot, you know, get out of here.
Yeah.
Well,
and even to take it one. That
would be making the demon see you.
Yeah, to take it one step further, it's that person who, while they're walking through New York, you can tell that they're a tourist because they've stopped and they're looking up.
Yeah.
Like you've literally just made yourself a red flag for anybody with evil intent. They know you're not from around there.
Oh, yeah.
You know? So I want to thank you so much for the open, candid conversation tonight. I would love to invite you back on the show to talk about these things even more. I love talking about these topics because I think so many people are in that microscopic way in their life affected by these things and do not realize it.
No,
even
don't.
when it comes to the like Father Malachi Martin would say, addiction being a point of demonic obsession and demoniac obsession, where it's like you are literally surrendering a part of your free will to something else to attain something.
Yep.
And by doing that, you have inequitied yourself. You know, you've opened that door and opened that gaping wound that hopefully the couple stitches you know how to put in will keep the gushing from happening. You know.
Yeah, you don't bleed to death.
And I think especially in this day and age, June, with social media being the way it is, whether cancel culture or not, just the way that our whole world seems to be fingertip away from the powder keg fuse, you know, and just so utterly ready to napalm the bridge that they are standing on. Emotionally, spiritually. Yeah, absolutely. And so willing to. Even today, there were some people, like I had to tell my wife, I love some of the people that I went to college with, but it's like, we all had the same education. Pretty sure we all read the same core curriculum. How the heck did you come out of it with this interpretation?
Oh, yeah. I know, right? You're like, holy cow.
That is a whack interpretation.
Yeah, I know.
And not that everybody...
It's kind of like the Bible. My grandma says, you know, no two people will interpret the Bible in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
There'll always be some variation because everybody thinks differently.
Well, and that was the point that I made to these good folks was, don't forget, let's find all the absolute matching points between those gospels. All right. And once you find all those for me, we'll sit down and we'll talk. I'll wait. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'll definitely wait.
No. That's for sure.
So, yeah. Once again, thank you so much, June. You were absolutely invited to come back on the show anytime.
I would love to. Yep.
We're going to go ahead and let you go for this evening. I know you have other things to take care of. I hope that you have a very blessed holiday season, whatever holiday you happen to celebrate, if you celebrate one.
I do.
So, Merry Chris Hana Kwanzaa to you. I think that covers most of them. So
Yeah, there you go.
until next time, June, thank you so much. Feel free to tune in on social media. Feel free to tune in on the website with everybody else. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Look forward to having you on again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Take care.
Oh, you bet.
All right.
Wow. What an absolutely amazing conversation. That was great. I have been looking forward to that since LITM Media with Michelle Freed got a hold of me and said that we would be having her on. I have loved what I've read in A Medium's Guide to the Paranormal. And just real quick, one of the quotes I was going to read from it on air. Once I learned how to meditate, recall, and release negative energy, the next step was to create a place of peace and safety within myself. And I think that's what we forget in this whole process, folks, is the release of the negative energy and the refinding of a safe place within ourselves. Even whenever you question, because don't forget, don't be afraid to question what you believe and why you believe it. Science in and of itself is not a static field that is forever changing. And that's some of what we're going to be getting into with our next guest, Dennis Stone, owner of America's Stonehenge, right after these messages, folks. Enjoy. Oh. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com and the code is CURIOUS7. The video that you are watching is from the homepage of America's Stonehenge.
On a mysterious granite hill in southern New Hampshire rests a series of stone structures. Who built them and why? Was it a stone calendar intended to mark the seasons for agriculture? Did it serve as a religious site for rituals long forgotten? When settlers first colonized the New World in the 17th century, they discovered that they were not the first.
Well, I'm standing in the Patty area, and actually standing inside Patty's cellar hole. And Seth Patty Sr. bought a piece of the sill top back in 1734. And
that is Dennis Stone, owner of America's Stonehenge. Dennis is our guest today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Yet again, Dennis, you've been on numerous times to talk about this incredible site that has been in your family since you were a kid, America's Stonehenge, right there in New Hampshire. One of the, like, as far as we know right now, one of the oldest archaeological sites in North America, that is still yet to be figured out what the purpose is, but has astrological alignments out the wazoo at this location. And you just sent me some beautiful pictures, this being Solstice, of the alignments that occur today. So thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome back. How have you been, Dennis?
Well, first I'd like to say happy solstice to you and everyone, and we're
Same.
doing very well. Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoy being on the show with you, and I guess it's been a few months, but it's a beautiful day in New Hampshire, and we had a beautiful sunrise this morning.
Yeah, the images that you sent me are absolutely stunning, and you've sent me images before. We have numerous images that we've shown on air whenever you've been on with us before. But the images that you sent today are, I think, some of the most beautiful and really striking as far as the alignment itself that happens on solstice. And like you were saying before we just brought you on, these alignments happen at sunrise and sunset at the location, correct?
No, that is correct. Yep. Yeah, so we got to get up early in the morning to watch the sunrise, and then we're back in the evening to watch the sunset. And because during the winter solstice, it rises around 7:12, and it sets about 4:14 roughly this afternoon, so it's not too bad. But in the summer, we have to be up about 4 o'clock in the morning for about a 5:15 sunrise, and I think the sun sets around 8:24 roughly. So that's a really long day, and we're open all day during the summer solstice, so it's not so bad, not too bad today. But it was a little bit chilly this morning, and I think it's going to get up to 42 today, and we're looking forward to, I think, a sunny sunset according to the forecast. But it is New England, so you just never know, how it's going to turn out.
That's right. Just sit around and wait.
Mm-hmm. See what happens. Yeah, I've been actually filming it for a week now because, the word standstill the solstice means standstill. So for about a week before and after, you can get a pretty good shot. The sun doesn't move too much during this time of year or during the summer solstice, because equinox, if you miss it by a couple of days, it moves pretty quickly across the horizon for the rising and setting. So I got some real pretty pictures even a week ago yesterday. It was very close. You have to just move yourself just a little bit to make it work, and they're off a little today due to the Earth's tilt. But yeah, we've been doing it since actually we opened up the clearing in 1965 for the winter solstice sunset. I was just communicating with a gentleman who was a guide back then. I think he started with us in 1963. I got a picture of him standing in front of the building here, I think one of his first years in uniform as a guide, and then he ended up as an assistant manager in the late 60s. But in 65, he started clearing out that alignment, and by 67, he actually took the very first photographs of the winter solstice sunset. There were a few clouds. They're kind of like cirrus cloud. You could dimly see the sun through it. And I have those photographs for the first time this year. He actually gave them to me. And he's been living all over the world. He's a retired nuclear engineer. He ended up 10 years ago in Japan, in Osaka. And just as he was going to return to Charlotte, North Carolina, with Westinghouse, the Fukushima plant went off, So he ended up on that project. But he actually installed the nuclear reactors on the Nimitz, the USS Nimitz, which is still active today. And, recently was in the news because of the Tic Tac UFOs and stuff. So, but he's in France right now with his wife, and her family's from there. And he's over there for the winter. So I invited him up today. But he told me a couple of days, he goes, well, I just got to France, But he wants to be here for the summer solstice, and he lives on an island in Maine now. So he's lived in France, he's lived in Japan, he's lived all over the place, but he's retired, and he's going to be back in Maine this summer. So I hope to have him here. So in 67, he took the first photographs, and 3 years later, he actually drove his little bug-eyed Triumph up from Newport News, Virginia, where he was working on the Nimitz. And we got my dad, myself, a neighbor from the next town up in Derry, New Hampshire, where we're from. Drove 8 miles down here, met him at his house. About a foot of snow on the ground on that December 20th or 21st day of December 1970. And he actually built a wooden snowmobile. And he was very, very talented and very smart. He built a snowmobile out of wood. And I got a picture of that. It was from parts, and it worked. And he actually drove it up and broke the trail for us because we had to walk a half a mile through about a foot of snow, and he helped break the trail with that machine. And I wish he still had it. I asked him recently what happened to it. He said, well, I recycled it into other projects, so it's gone today. But unfortunately, that was 51 years ago today, actually. And my dad painted a picture of that sunset from slides we took, and he took a whole sequence of the slide of the sun actually setting, one after the other, and he made a painting of that. My dad loved to paint, a little bit of an artist, and that's hanging in our visitor center today. I'm actually looking at it across the building here, his painting, and it has snow on the ground, like I mentioned, a foot of snow, and today we have about an inch, so it looks very similar to today. So yeah, we've been doing this for decades, actually, since the mid 60s, actually.
Well, and once again, the astrological alignments that occur at this site are beyond compare and numerous. You yourself were an airline pilot for your career, and trained observer, somebody who sees things like this from the air. The overhead layout of this property is pretty phenomenal, and even just looking at the map with the with the directional locations of alignments, it's almost like it was parceled out by the people that built it.
The wall pattern is so amazing, and now that we've done a forestry project over the last 2 winters, you can see it with your eyes pretty much when you're walking around up there. You can really see the walls in the distance, where back in the 50s and 60s when we got involved, it was pretty thick woods up there, you know. It was hard to see, too many feet in front of you. You know, if you saw a wall, you saw a piece of the wall. So a lot of it kind of remained hidden just behind brush and trees, so many trees, and you could actually go up to the wall and look at it, but you'd only see a section of it, because the trees and everything run away. And we really have it opened up when we opened up all the astronomical alignments much wider, so you can actually watch the sun as it comes down in the slant, or rises, and it looks really, really nice now. And we actually opened up the lunar alignments for the first time. The moon goes through an 18-and-a-half-year cycle. The sun does its cycle in 12 months, of course. And I think it's 2025. We're going to have the next lunar major standstills. And it happened in 1969 and every 18-and-a-half years after that. And I think 2025 is the next. And then 9 years after that, it's the lunar minor, they call it, standstills, since 1965, and we finally did it over the last 2 winters, and we'll have to wait, I think, almost 3 years to see if we cleared it correctly. We can actually watch the moon rise and set over the proper, markers, these marker stones, Wow. And there are about 57 alignments that we know of today, with the sun, moon, and 24 stars. So it seems like it's a pretty sophisticated site. I don't believe these are coincidences, as mainstream some archaeologists, and researchers and scholars, so forth, say, it must be a coincidence. These stones are actually taken off the bedrock. They've been shaped using hammer stones, and they look like big arrowheads stood on end. Some are standing today. About half of them are still standing, and some of the biggest ones, almost 8.5, 9 feet, fallen, just because of earthquakes and probably trees hitting them and who knows what, and maybe frost action causing them to collapse. But that's true of Stonehenge. I got pictures of Stonehenge. I've been to Stonehenge 4 or 5 times, and I got some photographs more recently of cranes that were actually putting up some of the big stones back in the 40s and 50s. I was rather surprised, even though I've been there and I've read the literature, I was really surprised as to what they restored there. But here, we really haven't other than the North Stone that was tipping over in 1988, we excavated around it and found a fire pit. And the fire pit was above the base of it, and it was a later feature. So the stone was put in, soil very slowly, settled, and you have the stratigraphy of different layers of soil representing different eras. And the lower you go, the older it is. And it wasn't disturbed, and the fire pit was in that. And it dated to about 1,400 years old. So the fire pit came in later, and somebody used a North Stone monolith as a backstop for a fire at some point around 1,400 years ago.
Yeah,
so that kind of dated that stone, minimum, date on it,
Sure. I mean, at a minimum, that somebody found it at that point and was using it. Now, just to ask, I don't know if we've ever really covered it. You guys do regular archaeological digs out there. Like you said, you've been excavating and doing things and having folks from museums, things like that out since the 60s. What kind of... are there any settlement remains? Anything?
Oh, wow, that's a great
like
question.
That,
actually, yeah. So, our archaeologist just retired. She was with us for 32 years, since 1989,
Oh, wow.
and she retired actually a year ago. But she was here a couple weeks ago, and she goes to Florida every winter with her daughter. She's in her 80s now. And when she started with us in 1989, she was a president of the New Hampshire Archaeological Society, which my dad was a member of that too. And she was kind of mainstream, but she never left us, And she did shovel test pit study across the hill in the 90s, and even actually continuing that up to a year ago. And I helped her in many of those shovel test pits. But the actual excavation began in 1937 with William Goodwin, who put up the chain link fence around the site. So it's been it'd be about 84 years of research, study, and excavation. And hammer stones, rubbing stones, stone picks, stone hoes, actually, beautiful stone hoe we have on display in our museum, plus those other artifacts I mentioned, and arrowheads and rubbing stones have been found on the site. So we have Stone Age tools and utensils and weapons that have been found on the site in the ruins over the last 84 years. But Aki, unfortunately, now she's retired, and she comes up here for the summer again. She's looking for another one of her colleagues in the New Hampshire Archaeological Society or to see if somebody else can come in here and kind of direct the archaeology for us, and she's keeping her eyes open for somebody that might be willing. Problem with it is this site's so unique. It's big stones, and most of the archaeologists in this area look at colonial artifacts, post-colonial. If they're pre-colonial Native American, they're looking at points, they're looking at fire pits, they're looking at, maybe a burial site perhaps, but they're not looking at big stone walls and chambers and monoliths that align with the sun and all of that, like you saw in the photograph. That's just not in what they've been trained in,
Well,
and that's kind of a problem.
That's not necessarily part of the local Native American day-to-day.
Right. Yeah, that's possible. Native Americans actually recently, I get the New Hampshire archaeological publications, and my dad, again, was a lifetime member, and my uncle was vice president of that back in the 60s, and he was instrumental in the astronomy here, too. My Uncle Oz, he passed away about 5 years ago at 95. He was a World War II pilot, B-17s, and after the war, B-29, so I was kind of inspired by that to be an airline pilot. But he worked here. He used to work for Raytheon and for Sanders Corporation, which became Sanders Lockheed, and he was a electromechanical engineer. But during layoffs, because of federal government contract, my dad put him to work here in 74 as the manager for about the next 4 years until he got called back to either Raytheon or Sanders. And he did a lot on the astronomy, actually starting in the 60s while he was still fully employed. He was one of the, along with our manager I mentioned, he and a few other people were really involved with the astronomy of the site. And so that kind of continues today. We're just looking for an astronomer and we're looking for an archaeologist. And as you mentioned, most of these archaeologists aren't familiar with these big stone type complexes. And we're one of 800 in the Northeast. They go right from Quebec right down to Pennsylvania. And they are dating some of these using optically stimulated luminescence testing. We'll see how well that works out. But the preliminary results right now, it's uncalibrated results of 22 different places across the Northeast, including our site, are pre-contact dates, so before Columbus dates on them. So seems to support our 12 carbon datings and our astronomical data, the stone tools, and the way the stones were shaped using hammerstones. And that was worked on 40 years ago by our late Dr. David Stewart Smith, who spent 40 years working with us. And he had the state archaeologist at the time, Dr. Gary Hume. Same name as our archaeologist. They're both friends, but they live close together, but they're not married. Everybody thinks they're married because our archaeologist, the one that just retired, her husband was a doctor of geology at Tufts University, Dr. James Hume, and they traveled the world. But Dr. Gary Hume was a lithic specialist, and he was in the 80s and 90s the head of the New Hampshire archaeological, research for the state of New Hampshire. Actually, he got paid by the state, and so he looked at the way the stones were shaped up here, and he says it's unmistakable that these big stones that were quarried off the bedrock without metal tools and then shaped using hammerstones were actually done in the same fashion as a small arrowhead. Percussion flaking, using stone against stone, not metal tools against stone. So he, over about 40 years ago, verified what Dr. David Stewart Smith was doing. He actually oversaw Dr. David Stewart Smith's work here. And Dave worked with us from 78 all the way up to 5 years ago when he passed away from cancer. And before he joined us, he was in England doing restoration on medieval and megalithic sites for what became English heritage today. He actually was over in England for 6 years and up in Scotland working on a lot of the ancient sites, and he brought that knowledge with him here. Originally from Connecticut, and when he came back from Europe, he didn't even know these sites existed, so it was in for quite a surprise when he returned from Europe, or from England. And then he joined us and stayed with us for 40 years, working on the way, these sites, and he repaired other sites in New England too. The Upton Chamber in Massachusetts, which is an amazing structure, the Acton Chamber. But again, we know about 800 sites today, so this is not the only site. And North Stonehenge, Connecticut has about 8,000 of these same features over 35,000 acres. Chambers, astronomical alignments, serpentine walls, and all sorts of other features that you see there we have on our site on 110 acres. So we're not just one site by itself.
I just brought up the map on screen from the overhead view because it really, really illustrates the walls, the layout of this complex. And the reason why I asked if there were any settlement remains, sure, fire pits, things like that, arrowheads, chert, from where this stuff was worked, that kind of thing, absolutely. But it's not like there have been homes found.
Right.
It's
right,
not like
yeah.
anybody settled this area and like, oh, look, over here is where they grew corn. Over here
Right.
is where they
Right.
processed food. Over here was their trash pile. That
Yeah.
that isn't the case at this complex.
That's a great point. I might have got off topic slightly.
No,
What I
no,
was going
that's
to say,
okay.
she's actually that was one of the things she was doing in the last few years, actually looking for a settlement. We think the main site, it's a hill about 360 feet above sea level, about 110 acres. And then around the 15 acres is where the astronomical, what we call foresights, were all located. And I think that was a sacred area at the top of the hill. She was looking at lower parts of the hill, especially where the hill gets a little flatter, but it still drains, naturally. So it might be a good place to have a habitat site. But we didn't find the middens in the stone ruins, the trash piles and all of that. The site is fairly clean archaeologically. Like, I know most of the megalithic sites, I think there's about 50,000 in Western Europe, and they are starting to find the habitat sites. They're made out of wood or hide and bark, something perishable. But by LiDAR and ground penetration radar and satellite imaging, they were able to find some of their living areas finally after all these years, because archaeologists have been pulling their hair out of their head trying to find out, where did the people live that built Stonehenge? And they're starting to find the settlements now.
Yeah.
But I think these sites were like tombs, temples, and monuments. And, they were places of ritual, ceremony. And we did find a workshop on this 30 years ago when she was starting her shovel test pit thing. She worked 3 years on the North Stone, and by 92 she was starting to do the STP, shovel test pit study. Almost one shovel test pit per acre, 50 centimeter across hole, and they dig down to the pre-occupational level, like bedrock, glacial soil, or whatever, and they look for geological, archaeological evidence. She found fire pits up there. She found rhyolite that came from north of Boston, about 30 miles away. It was imported, and it was being made into tools. And she thought at the time this could be a habitat site. I would say probably about 600 or 700 feet from what we call the main site. And it was to the south of the main site. And but she was trying to relocate, because we actually surveyed all these points, except for some reason she lost the actual location of that particular STP hole. They backfill them so you can't see them after they're filled back in. And unfortunately, she retired before we were able to locate that. We found a couple other really interesting underground features, including one that looks like a turtle, and it's all these little stones are grouped together with look like a turtle. I had two post moles where a poster once stood up and they rotted, and she brought in a doctor of geology who was one of her husband's students, and he's back in the day, and he came up with his Tufts University van, and he went up there and he looked at it and he goes, well, that's not a geological artifact, it's man-made,
Wow.
Which confirmed what she thought. We had to recover it with soil, backfill it, and it's unfinished today. And unfortunately, she's in her 80s, so she really can't do that kind of work anymore.
Yeah.
So we need to pick it up, and she will brief the person, whoever, if we can find somebody, she's going to give them a briefing. But that's a great point. Where did the people live? The Spigot River is on the west of our site, and down in the river area would be a great place to live near the water, which could be used for transportation, possibly fishing. They were the old roads in the old day. To the west of our site is a Pawtucket Native American Trail, and to the east side of us is the Pentucket Native American Trail. The Pentucket and Pawtucket were the local Native American tribes that were part of the Pennacook, in historic and I suppose prehistoric. And those are the Native Americans. And if there were anybody coming in from a different part of the world, I'm sure they would have exchanged goods. They may have traded with them and perhaps got along with the people. We just don't know, I mean, it's just speculation on our part, purely, But I will say it doesn't look like a battlefield up there. We don't have any signs of any kind of, battle going on or anything like that, So I don't think that's the case. I don't know how well they got along with other people. Maybe they did, But again, these sites are all over the place, and we don't seem to find any evidence that these were they're not like a fortress, where they
aren't a rampart or an embattlement or anything like that. If they are, there are some pretty gaping holes.
They're pretty bad. Yeah, because you can step over. Although the soil is built up somewhat next to the walls over the thousands of years. Yeah, but you can step over. My little Nova Scotia duck-toiling retriever dog. She's like the LL Bean dog. You see in the ads recently. So she can walk over these walls. With no problem. And
that
she
guy
does.
lost his contract after the first job.
Yeah. It was a losing thing. And, I mean, it didn't work. But we do have the windows in the walls. They're beautiful linteled windows, and they're found in North Stonington. They're found in the Berkshires.
Yeah.
A lot of them are found in the serpent walls themselves, and these are just beautiful. We found 14 of them here in the last 5 years, and we found what we think are 14 serpentine walls or snake-shaped walls. Some are straight, some are S-shaped, some are 90-degree heads and 90-degree tails, and some loop around and bite their tail like the watch house.
Oh,
and that watch house one, I don't know if I sent you the LiDAR imaging of that, but it goes 2,550 feet. It goes counterclockwise, kind of the way the Earth spins, I think, on its axis, and the way we go around the sun. But whether that's relevant or not, maybe the people kind of knew that, but I don't know. But that's the way it goes, and it undulates, behind the head, and then it goes all the way around. One more undulation, a 90-degree pointy tail right in front of what would be the mouth of the boulder, and it looks like a serpent head, and it looks like it's biting it, perhaps like the Ouroboros, the eternity. It does enclose the 15 acres, and our gentleman from Connecticut who had that handheld LiDAR did that area. Took him several trips up from Connecticut to do that, and then he spent 600 hours processing all the data, and you can see down to a centimeter. And boy, did the walls show up amazing, but he didn't do the other 90 acres, It's just so time-consuming, and he's walking around with a unit. And it's pretty amazing. So he doesn't have all the serpent walls and all the other walls that surround the site, but that 15 acres there, I think that serpent wall is kind of protecting that 15 acres. And in the middle of that is the main site, That's what it looks like to us, right now. My dad died. He died 12 years ago, right around that, just before Christmas. And he didn't know anything about the serpentine walls. And yet he spent so much time out looking at the walls. Again, they were so hard to see with all the brush and trees, and he didn't see any of the windows. And the windows are just, now you go, how could you possibly miss these things for 60 years, including myself, because I was out in the woods all the time. But once you see one, your eyes are trained, and once you clear out the brush, then they're like a sore thumb. They just stand out and you can't miss them. And a lot of them seem to have shutters, stone shutters, so you could actually close them up, either horizontal shutters or they're cobbles. And I'm not sure if I sent you those photographs or a slab that fit right into them. I think I sent them last night to you.
Yes, you did. And I have those images coming up on screen right now as we're talking. And once again, those windows, did the windows align to anything? Are they perhaps like peep sites or anything?
I love
like
your questions. Oh, you're right on it. That's perfect. Yeah, that is a wonderful question. In fact, a friend in Connecticut, he lives right near North Stonington, and I kind of turned him onto the windows a few years ago, what they are, because they're in North Stonington, and he's going to do a project on that. Because one of the questions he raised yesterday is, are these actually aligned with the sun, moon, or stars, or something else? And we just don't know. I would say initially looking at them, they don't seem to have any correspondence to the sun, moon, and stars, and that may be wrong. They just seem to be like some of them, like one of the walls across from the watch house, which is where that 2,550 feet. This is a separate wall in front of the face of it. There's a separate wall, and it's a linear wall, straight wall, and both ends have stones. One's a triangular head, and the other one's a tail turned 90 degrees to the end of the serpent. It has 4 windows in it. And one of them I sent you has that little stone, that flat slab that will actually fit in front of it that I mentioned we moved, which we don't like to do up here, but we did that to experiment and for research. There's 4 windows there. They're not in your pictures that you have. You have the big one. And then there are 2 on one side and 1 more on the other side. And they seem to have stone shutters near the front of the windows. So you could actually shut them up. And one of them has cobbles. I think I sent that one to you. It has like little cobbles in it. And those are loose. I didn't take them out, but I touched them. They're not supporting the lintel stone. They're just in there.
That was the one that whenever you sent me the pictures of the windows, that was the one that popped it in my head of those cobbles look like a sight. Like they look like the rear sight on a rifle, the way that they come together to a V where it's like, hey, look. Yeah. Like you could look directly down them and sightline something like you were surveying.
Right. That's a good point. It's something slightly different. Is one of the this is actually and we're gonna look at what you're talking about, because I think that's very important what you're saying right now. I think that's something that Doug is his name, and he lives in Connecticut, and he's been in this for over 30 years, and all these serpent walls and these windows. he's working with a National Register of Historic Places. From here to California, we're finding the serpent walls. And in many of the sites, we're finding the windows too. And here we have, right at the moment right now, I know of 14 serpent walls, at least we think they are, and 14 windows. So we have an equal number. And I was telling Doug last night, I was texting him, I said, I think most of the windows are in serpent, but there are a couple exceptions unless we don't recognize this particular wall as a serpent. Most of them are in serpent walls, but not all. And even in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, there's some beautiful serpent walls, and you can see it looks like a serpent, and there are beautiful windows in it. In Connecticut, it's the same thing, although a lot of work's going to be done on both the serpent and the windows. I did a radio show several years ago, a woman from Indiana. She's a doctor out there, and she does a lot of medical shows. She wanted to branch into other topics and fields, and I was her first guest on non-medical stuff. Nice. And she used to be in Texas as a nurse in Dallas, because I used to go there for my American all the time for training. But she was there, and she said, when a patient would die or were passing, the family would call me into the room sometimes and have me open up the window and let the spirit pass out the window. After I was talking about these windows, and she goes, that might be a modern version of what they were doing in the past. And I said, yeah, especially where they have shutters too. You can actually open and close these shutters. And that was really, and I told my wife that, and she was, that was at a Catholic hospital, but my wife goes, yeah, I've heard of that too, but it's not necessarily a Catholic thing. And I'd say half the visitors come here when we talk about this, about half of them say, yeah, I've heard about this, letting the spirit pass through a window, but about half haven't. Like myself, I had never heard of that before, but it kind of sounds like maybe that's what they were doing with it, Well, maybe,
Even if these windows were being used once again to sightline other such structures, they don't have to be astronomically aligned. They could be like, okay, which way are we going to get to structure 13 so that we can hunt this part of the season? You know?
Or something symbolic or hunting, something practical, or maybe something symbolic. That's a great point. And I will say one of the, we have triangular shaped serpent heads in all different shapes, boulders. But one of them in Connecticut, actually not one, there's many of them. And in this book called Ceremonial Stonework by Mark Starr, he's been here a few times. He lives right in North Stonington. He lived there 30 years, wrote a book, beautiful book. And I wish we carried it here. We should carry it here because I've had so many people that want it. It came out in 2016, and the first time I saw it was at a archaeological meeting in Groton, Connecticut. And I had already found a couple serpents and a couple windows, no frame of reference. And when I was there thumbing through different books, they have like a table with all these books. 8,000 different structures. And I said, is this all in New England? And I realized it was not Stonington. He shows one of the serpent heads in there. He shows quite a few serpents in the book, but one of them's triangular shaped, just like a couple of ours. And the head has on top of it a triangular shaped stone, just a small stone sitting on the head right on top of it. And he goes, I found several of these. And if I go 100 feet or 150 feet in that direction, there's a cairn, a pile of rocks. If it was one, he said, it would just maybe a coincidence, but I keep finding several of these stones with these pointed triangular stones, but it's pointing. And if you go, and there's a lot of woods there, so you have to walk kind of in a straight line through the woods. And there's another cairn right where it's pointing towards. It might not even be in sight today. North Stonington was clear of trees. They're pretty sure when all these structures were made, so you could actually see it back in the ancient times. But it's repeating itself over and over again with that. Just kind of what you just said. Although this is a serpent head with a little stone that's actually on top, and it beautiful triangle, and it's pointing right at a cairn, maybe 150, 100, whatever it is. He goes, it just repeats itself over and over again down there. So maybe the windows do the same. Maybe the windows do the same thing.
Even these marker stones that you have on site, the triangular stones that you're talking about that are similar to the ones that Good Doctor is talking about, these are all over the property. Images that you sent me, they are all different stones. They're large. One of them looks like into the multiple thousands of pounds. And
they are,
to work this kind of stone, is it is this slate? Is it a type of granite? I know of course New Hampshire is the granite state. But
it is.
But what kind of stone is it? Because most of the stones up around there are I'm a rock hound. They're pretty tough. You know, it's
It is. Yeah, you're right. It does. It is foliated, the granite here, and it is granite, made of mica, feldspar, and quartz, and some other things. But and we are the granite state, as you said. That's excellent. Not everybody knows it, but it is foliated on this hill, and it does come up in layers, and that's why the ancient people were able to get these slabs, off the bedrock. And people sometimes think when we're talking about a quarry site, we're talking about a big hole in the ground, like you see up in Vermont at the Rock of Ages and all of that. I used to live in Vermont. Marble and granite quarries, and they're huge. We have some in New Hampshire, up near Concord, New Hampshire, the Swenson mine. I think they're in Connecticut too, and we visited those, but those are modern quarries. But ours is basically, the hilltop was probably bare back then, and our archaeologist, Pat, and her husband, the geologist, kind of, one of the results of her years of doing shovel tests, but she says maybe the hill was 75% bare 4,000 years ago, 25% covered with glacial soil, and then later soils that, from windblown soils and vegetation decay, they very slowly accumulate to what we have today, with a thin layer covering most of the hill. But if I sent you out with a crew 4,000 years ago and most of the hill bedrock was visible, you could go out and walk around and say, this is a great place. I think we can lever this bedrock out of here because it has a fracture in it, and we'll work it, and we'll get a stone that Dennis wants, this 8-foot by 10-foot stone. And there were 34 of these stones still laying in situ in their quarry site. We found them over the last 40 years, propped up, and they've been lifted off the bedrock. So somehow they separated them, they raised them, and these are multi-ton stones of various sizes, and they put another, like a field stone, a rounded stone, or even a little block, square, rectangular stone underneath it, artificially raising it so they could actually strike the edge of it to do percussion flaking and dressing or shaping the stone.
Yeah.
And the first one was found in 1982, and that's when Dr. Gary Hume, he did 3 projects, and one of them was that project of working on these quarried slabs.
Sure.
And today, if I sent you out, you'd be like, are you crazy, Dennis? Most of the hill's got trees on it. It's got, dirt on it. Unless they have ground penetration radar to go below the soil and look at the bedrock, I don't know where I'm going to find that, start looking. I'll have to just start digging everywhere. So that's another good piece of evidence. This site wasn't built by the Paddies in the last 200 years, that the hilltop, because these stones are still out there, they're almost covered over today and buried with soil. You can just see them sticking through the soil that's accumulated with a rock underneath holding up. Some of them are like 10 feet across, some are 5 feet across, and there's a couple that might be 4, but they're 163 pounds per cubic feet, so we can actually do the dimensions and come up with the weight of the stones. So about 163 pounds per cubic foot is the weight of granite here, and these things are up to 1,000 feet from the main site. And I think some of these big slabs are going to be used for roofs on future chambers. And in the last couple of years, we found maybe 15 more, and also it dawned on us. I don't know why it didn't dawn on us earlier. Maybe other people that did dawn on that they had a much bigger project they were going to build up here, and it was like a work in progress, and then they walked away from it. It's like, okay, now why did they leave all these stones all over the place and not finish this? Was it warfare? I don't know. Maybe environmental. Maybe some people suggest that these were old world people coming over here, and they're going to the Great Lakes, bringing back copper to mix with tin to make bronze. It's one of those theories. I don't know how that
well, and not beyond, I sent you the article just yesterday talking about from the BBC where Vikings settled in North America as early as 1021. A new study
Isn't
is
that
found.
Something? Absolutely.
And when you're talking about this kind of stonework, once again, not that it's stacking stones, things like that didn't exist with the local indigenous population, but going through the effort to make stone structure, not necessarily so. When you're talking about Vikings, Europeans, they definitely had the knowledge of stone work. They had the knowledge of how to find a fissure in a stone like granite and take advantage of it through rapid heating with fire, rapid cooling with water, to carry that fissure, to make it longer, and to be able to shear that off and use it. And even just the knowledge, there's a difference between knapping, like what was done by most of the Native American tribes to make tools, things like that, and working stone.
Right, on a big scale,
to
on
the
such
size
a heavy
of these multiple ton boulders that are shaped in arrow fashion, stuff like that. That's some pretty intense working, and with a hard stone. So that means you got to find a stone harder than the granite that you're working with to use as the hammer stone.
Yeah, or your tool's going to wear out very quickly. Yeah, exactly. You know, and all the walls, I think just in the 15 acres, remember there's 90 more acres of walls and serpentine walls and windows outside that. They found in the late, I think it was probably in the 80s, David Stuart Smith did a booklet, and he did ancient modern quarrying techniques. It was a really nice little book. And we used to sell them here, you know, it's been out of print for years. But he identified 300 slabs of stones in those walls. Now, farmers usually build walls fairly straight or linear. Some have curves, you know, some exceptions, but a lot of the field stones, the rounded stones. And we have those in the walls, but we also have so many big slabs that are actually peeled off the bedrock by these builders. You either set on their end, which is vertical, and they're called orthostats. If they look like an arrowhead, we call them a monolith, like, you know, the astronomical ones. Or they're laid horizontally, you know, on top of each other, stacked. And the same thing in North Stonington, too, you know. And some are actually like a whole bunch of like little triangular ones. They're a little bit smaller than the alignment, which look like an arrowhead. These are like small versions of those. And there's a section we call the shark tooth wall. And they're all like one after the other. North Stonington has the same feature, too. You know, it's the only other one in New England that I'm aware of so far that has that shark tooth wall look to it. One little slab after the other, like looks like shark teeth. But they did, you know, they didn't just gather up field stones. They actually made stones by removing them from the bedrock. And they use them for roof slabs, wall slabs, the sacrificial table, the astronomical alignments, orthostats, and the walls of the chambers, like the east-west chamber. And they did that in Europe too, and also in the stone walls themselves. And it's just like these walls, even in the 50s when my dad came, the walls around here, and they're hard to see because these walls have a lot of slab work. They don't look like farmers' walls, and they turn, they twist, and they bend all over the place. As you can see, they don't look like they're very straight at all.
Well, yeah, precisely. It's not like you were laying out a plot. If you were laying out something to straight row hoe, this is not the location.
Right. Exactly. Anything but that. It looks like they were either that or they were drinking a little too much of the moonshine. But
little bit. But to go back to the stonework real quick, it's interesting the structures that are there. And I know I brought up before, has anybody done any frequency study inside of there to see if there are any resonant frequencies? But if you were using this location for astronomical observation, guaranteed, in addition to the sun, you would also have stars, planets, things like that rise over these monuments, that rise over these stones on location.
Venus would be a big one, Venus, you know, and the 5 points of Venus would be, pentagram and stuff.
To especially look at some of these as possible just observation tunnels, where it's like, hey, let's block out some of the light from the moon overhead so that we can see the stars in the distance.
Yes. Well, that's a good point. That's a very good, you know, the chimney flue in the Oracle Chamber, the biggest structure still remaining on the site, has that chimney flue. And I've gone up there with a gentleman named Morris Payne. He's passed away since, but starting in the late 90s, he was involved with the New England Antiquities. But he was a architect from Harvard University. And his work is, in Iran. His work is in the U.S. Embassy, which I've been right next to in Greece, in Athens. You know, he was really quite a guy. And boy, his work that he did here, he did a lot of work on the water levels around here, you know, with the USGS up in Pembroke, New Hampshire, you know, the Geological Service. And unfortunately, he would have worked with Pat Hume's husband, but Pat Hume's husband, he passed away from somebody hit him on the highway right after he retired, you know, and it was really sad. He was just getting involved with our site. But this gentleman, Morris Payne, and I went up to the Oracle Chamber, and we sat in there at night and looked up at the zenith stars. And then we tried to figure out how it would look 4,000 years ago as the Earth's tilt changes a little bit in the precession of the equinox. It's just, you know, because we're quite interested, because down in Mexico and Central America, they were looking at stars overhead, things that passed overhead, you know, above you, you know. And so that's a possibility.
Well,
that chimney could have been, you know.
Any hunting culture, any nomadic culture, any culture that is moving from place to place following a harvest that's happening naturally, you absolutely learn to recognize when those stars come up in the sky.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And what that preemptively means. You know, when we start seeing, like Orion is a big one, especially for hunting, stuff like that. So, to to think that the Native Americans weren't using that is, of course, silly. But it would be, I don't know, it's not necessarily of the norm for them, at least on the East Coast, to make observational sites, so to speak.
Right. They could have. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah,
If they did,
yeah.
you know, that needs to be studied more. And I think there might be old world visitors, but we know in New Hampshire, just like I mentioned, the New Hampshire Archaeological, one of the publications just the other day in the western part of the state near Keene, New Hampshire, they found 13,000-year-old evidence. That's the
Wow.
earliest, I think, in New Hampshire. So people were here. People go, was anybody in New Hampshire 4,000 years ago? Yes, we know they were. Were the old world visitors coming over too
Yeah.
is the big question, you know?
Well, and I think another big part of that is the fact of, even just in the annals of local history, the first time that it's mentioned, even, and that this site is mentioned in local writing, anything like that, it said that the Native Americans found it, that it was there when they came around.
Yeah, there's some reports of that for sure, definitely. And they didn't, you know, a lot of them didn't know what they were. You know, what are
Yeah.
these things? They were, I know in Gunjiwamp in Connecticut, which is near North Stonington, that site's near the Navy base down there in Groton. And in 1654, John Pynchon, a gentleman, wrote to Governor Winthrop and asked, what is this place? And that was 367 years ago, that this gentleman was asking questions about Gunjiwamp, which is a really cool site. It's 200
Yeah.
acres of stone structures and everything. We don't know how old it is. It seems to be, again, some of the dates are coming out are going back into around 400 AD. And some of the I think they're going to be doing more OSL dating on it. But it seems to be pre-contact, you know, before Columbus, and an ancient site too.
Yeah.
And so 367 years ago, they weren't saying, oh, yeah, Farmer Jones built this. They were like, who built this? You know, that kind of thing, from what we know, you know. we
Well,
understand.
and once again, when they went to the local Native Americans that they knew, that they had trading relationships with, things like that, and said, hey, what do you know about this? They were like, I don't know, man. That thing's been there since who knows when.
We've heard that. Yeah, we've heard that many times. Yeah.
Because they're pretty good on their oral histories. They're pretty good about
Right.
like remembering what a site was for, you know,
Yep.
remembering why it was constructed. And when they don't have a cultural history of it, but they have a cultural history of it being there, that's pretty interesting.
If your listeners go to Travel Channel, in the vault is the Holzer Files, and they filmed it last year. And we had a gentleman named Daryl Jameson, or Black Eagle, and I met him a couple times, and he's a Wampanoag in Massachusetts. He's a branch of the Wampanoag, and he's my Facebook friend too. But I had a really nice talk with him when they filmed him, and he's on that show talking about he does not believe it's his ancestors or any affiliated ancestors or, you know, relatives or any other tribe that built our site. In fact, he had an episode when he walked up on the site a couple of years ago. He couldn't get up to the top. He's also interested because his DNA shows that he has Orkney Island blood in him too.
Oh.
And he thinks he might be having some blood from Sir Henry Sinclair of
Wow.
the Earl of Yorkneys. And Sir Henry Sinclair's distant cousin was Sir James Gunn. So James, and his last name is Jameson. So his DNA shows he's Orkney Island and Native American blood, both of those. And he says, I think I could be related to Sir James Gunn. Of course, he was with Sir Henry Sinclair in 1398. I think he came to the New World, and there's that Westford Knight carving. We have a replica in our museum here of that whole thing. But he says it wasn't his ancestors on the Native American side. And that's on that Holzer Files. It aired this year, and it's on Discovery Plus and on Travel Channel. So that's a good example of a Native American speaking about the site, if anybody wants to watch that, you know?
Yeah, and it's just so phenomenal that every time we have you on, new stuff has been found, new alignments, new discoveries all the time. It's so great that you are constantly looking into this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
It's
a lot of surprises here. You know, I mean, just in the last 5 years, so many surprises for us. You know.
Yeah.
But
and don't get me wrong. Some of my guests have been there exploring the location as possible sites built by Nephilim. You know, things.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
things
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
That's
Hey,
Yep.
nothing is beyond reality.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no. The odds are, I would venture a guess, probably pretty closer to Viking or something along those lines.
maybe old world, maybe the
Yeah.
Phoenicians is another possibility.
Sure.
They traveled the world too. And the Viking
Absolutely.
settlements are so interesting. Yeah. I mean, the Maine coon cat up in Maine,
Yep.
it's a hybrid Norwegian forest cat, which the Vikings may have brought over, mating with a cat that's extinct
Yeah.
in Maine now. My dad had a couple of those Maine coon, the state cat of Maine, actually. Beautiful cat.
I had a Maine Coon.
Oh, did you? A Viking cat, half Viking cat. Yes, it is. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Very, very interesting stuff on the Northeast coast, especially whenever you start looking at things like Oak Island, all that kind of stuff. There are numerous observation towers on the East Coast that are just like, wow, that is a really big stone tower that was just built for what seems like absolutely no reason.
Wow. My friend from Connecticut, I mentioned earlier, he was just talking about, I think, 6 or 7 towers besides the Newport Tower in Rhode Island. And I had heard something about that. And he's going to do a thing on towers in Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
I think these are in Connecticut, 6 or 7 ancient towers. So that was just 2 days ago he was talking about that. And I heard a little bit about it before, but he brought it up again. I'm like, oh, that's right. There are some stone towers down there.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. Well, what's next for you guys? What's next on the radar? I mean, of course, you've got snowshoe season coming up. Make sure to go on by their website, folks. StonehengeUSA.com is where you can go to get tickets for you, your family. You can go see the alpacas. You can go snowshoeing on the site, which I think would be actually I think a really, really epic way to visit the site and kind of, I think, see it for the more than likely use that it was, which is some kind of astronomical harvest calendar. Something like that, and to see it in this state with the snow and everything else, I think is hugely important, because I think it was really, really used at this time of year for a lot of that stuff. So, what's next for you guys? What's on the horizon? What are y'all looking at? And how can people come be a part? How can they help?
Well, just, people having interest in this kind of thing to help to preserve and care for these sites, across not only our site, but right across the landscape, the even sites out west too, from vandalism and just, the care and love of these places. But so we got the winter season. We have snowshoe rentals here. We open up the entire hilltop. Normally you cover about 15 acres of trails, but we open up the entire hill, and we just added some brand new trails where they did the logging up here, the forest thinning, and you can go to the Glacial Cliff Shelter where we found the pottery back in 1958-59. It dates to about 2500 Middle Woodland period pottery, which we have on display in the museum. The alpacas are here, and we're open. Right now we're open 6 days a week. We close Mondays. Our website has all that information on it. And there's an email address on our website, and there's a free app download. If you download the app under America Stonehenge, you can do a complete virtual tour. You can do it in your lazy boy at home or couch. You can do a whole tour. And if you come here and use it, you actually walk with it with your smartphone. Oh, wow. And it takes you around the entire hilltop, the part that's open, but it will talk to you, pictures and text. And it's something we started 2.5 years ago, and people really love it, So if you can't make it here, now or ever, you can still do the complete tour. And if you do come here, you use it, and people, they get more out of it than just the paper map. The paper map is good, and we have a 12-minute video presentation. The theater right now is closed, but that's online too. So the 12-minute video, I think you showed a piece of it at the beginning. That's available on our website too, and they can purchase tickets on website, and they're a little discounted when you buy them online. So looking for an archaeologist, and looking for an astronomer too, to help us with future research. That's one of the big things right now. And we've been doing the LiDAR, we've been doing ground penetration radar, we've done a thermal imaging camera with a drone. It was a really expensive piece of equipment, and we got some of those images too. So more research on this site, and the OSL results should be out in mid-spring, and they're going to put it in a geology magazine. And the gentleman's name is Dr. Feathers from the University of Washington. He's retiring. And after that, it's going to go into an archaeology magazine with the results of our site and 19 more sites, I guess, across from here to Pennsylvania.
Wow. That's incredible. And once again, I hope during this search for information, during all of this, that you can figure out the alignments of the windows. That I guarantee there will be so many more discoveries over the next couple of years, Dennis.
I think you're right.
There's just
Sounds
every time I talk to you, you send me new pictures. Sometimes you just send me pictures, which are amazing. I love them.
And they're just on a cell phone. Yeah, that's all they are, cell phone pictures. They're pretty amazing what these cameras can do today too.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if I can make one recommendation,
Sure.
A live feed sunrise cam.
Oh, I have had that request, and that's a great idea. I was going to talk to my daughter-in-law in a couple of minutes about tonight for the sunset. Maybe we can do something live on that. We'll see.
Yeah,
maybe
there you go. Even just a live stream to the Facebook page. That kind of stuff is great for social interaction.
I'm going to talk to her after I hang up. I'm going to talk to her about that. I meant to talk to her yesterday, but we weren't here yesterday. We were closed. So.
This will be airing tonight, shortly after the solstice sunset on the East Coast. So it'll be just in time for people to tune in, see that. Once again, tell everybody where they can go to find tickets, to email you, to get the app, and how they can get involved, Dennis.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so it's StonehengeUSA.com, and our phone number's there, our email's there. You can purchase tickets there. You can download the free app on that site, too. And if anybody has any, questions, you can call us, or you can just email us, and we'll get back to you. We'll try to answer your questions if we can. And we're open every day of the year, except right now in this month and up to February 1st. We're just going to be open 6 days a week. We open from 9 till 4 right now. And last admission's at 3. And in February, we're going to go back to 7 days a week. And from 9 till 5, last admission at 4. So in snowshoeing, we don't have enough snow yet, but we have to have about 5 or 6 inches, depending on the density of snow. And then we'll get that all open, and people can enjoy the alpacas and snowshoeing and everything then. And But we hope people can visit us, make a trip out here.
Absolutely. And I will make a pilgrimage out there myself someday soon. I was so close and just could not peel myself away, and it hurt me inside knowing that the solstice was coming and I couldn't be there. But it will happen eventually, I assure you. Dennis Stone, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you so much for all the work that you have done to curate this site, your family, over the last many, many decades and generations. So thank you for maintaining that, keeping it up. Please do hold the line while we close things out. Of course, folks, while you are online checking out everything from Stonehenge USA, make sure to stop on by the Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find everything. That's where you can find the Knowledge Vault, guest videos. That's where you can go to the new store. Man, go by and check out the store. If you want some swag like the nice Curious Realm mug I'm drinking out of right now, hats, masks. You can not only keep your friends and family healthy, but you can sport the Curious Realm as well. Until next time, everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault on our website, CuriousRealm.com. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast services, as well as YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV through the APR TV app, available on all app markets. Curious Realm is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more great content or to become a sponsor of Curious Realm or other podcasts, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and remember, the other side is always watching.